Representative, thank you for the time. What led to the exchange that you had on the House floor?
Well, look, there's a lot of heightened passions regarding these three sets of bills. So it's not just one. It's HB6. It spends $1.5 billion for a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, of which I think 11 miles have been built, and about another $1.5 billion have already been appropriated that hasn't been spent. That's one bill. The other bill, HB4 and SB6, one would make it it's a smuggling bill. Look, we're against human smuggling. That's let's just lay that out. But what the bill does is it actually ties the hands of judges in issuing punishment. And so in the punishment phase, somebody that's convicted of this particular crime would get a 10-year mandatory minimum. There's very few crimes across the state where you issue this type of punishment on that type of crime. So that's one. The other one is empowers law enforcement, whether they're state law enforcement or local law enforcement, to determine on a stop if somebody is in the country illegally or without papers or undocumented. Right. So you're given this awesome power to local law enforcement to make that determination. At the same time, they're not trained in federal immigration policy. Second part of that bill is if that officer determines that that person is here unlawfully, then it gives that officer the authority to then drive that person down to the U.S.-Mexico border and in essence, deport that person. Right? So look, those are the three bills that were being debated last night. Two of the bills had already been, in essence, passed. The final bill on preempting federal immigration law had not been debated yet. Right. So the bill author was about to lay out his bill, and I want to talk about process because I think the process is important, and the viewers need to understand that. Vigorous debate on both sides of the aisle are good for educating the public. And in this case, you had about 40 to 50 amendments that were printed, ready to go to be debated on the speaker's desk. There was a motion that was brought to the floor, that was presented to the floor, seconded by 25 GOP of my colleagues, that would have ended the ability for anybody in the House, whether Democrat or Republican, to offer an amendment to the bill that Representative Spiller was about to lay out if it were not already on the speaker's desk. I will tell you this, that is a rare motion that's granted. That's a rare motion that is approved and voted on. It's only happened maybe 4 or 5 times in the last 20 or 30 years. And so the process by which we as Democrats and Republicans in a bipartisan manner govern ourselves means a lot, right? So that motion was granted and approved. I took issue with that, right? Because the effect of that motion being approved is that it cuts off the ability of anybody on the House floor to file an amendment to the bill. Now, look, with the exception of the House General Appropriations Act bill that reaches the floor, there's no calendar rule for any other bill but for the House Appropriations bill. And so if you're a member, I've had bills on the floor, anybody can debate that bill, and you have a front mic and you have a back mic. And any member, Democrat or Republican, if your bill reaches the floor, well, any one of my colleagues can go to the back mic and ask me questions. Anybody of my colleagues, Democrat or Republican, can go to Ledge Council, go ask them, hey, you know what? I have an idea. I want to amend Representative Spiller or Representative Walle's bill, and I need you to draft an amendment. Okay. So what the motion did was cut off the ability for any member to be able to have that opportunity to have a vigorous, full debate on a bill that may or may not have had an amendment that was not laid on the table, right? So that's the process. Um, the only other procedure that you would cut off that ability for members to have a vigorous debate is to call the question. And I know we're getting into into the weeds, but I think it matters for the viewing public because there are certain guidelines that we govern ourselves by. Both Democrats and Republicans voted for the rules. We use the rules to our benefit, right? And so that's just those are the rules that we ourselves are governed by. And for somebody and for the House to then decide to cut off the ability of any member to file any more amendments, look, that's un-American. I think any reasonable watcher of the legislature or just of government in general knows that there are always several sides to an issue, right? You have a vigorous debate. And look, we're Democrats in the Republican-controlled legislature. We know these bills are going to pass, but we have to have at least the ability to file amendments and have a debate, a vigorous debate. That's process. Substance. It's 3 bills. These 3 bills have become, look, I will acknowledge, I live 300 miles from the border. I live in Houston, Texas, born and raised in Houston. I love Houston and proud American, but I have family along the Mexico border, Texas-Mexico border. I have a dad, I have a brother, I have cousins, I have a grandmother that lives along the Mexico border. For me to say that there are not issues, there are, but instead of working, Governor Abbott working with Secretary Mayorkas, working with President Biden in the White House to resolve some of these border issues, he wants to antagonize folks. And then he wants to utilize these 3 bills to demonize a certain segment of our population by getting them involved in alleged criminal activity, right? Human smuggling, unlawful entry, building a wall that at this point it has not been effective in deterring migration. Look, we're all complicit in this border crisis. Why? It's twofold. You have push factors that are pushing migrants to come to the United States at the U.S.-Mexico border.
Right.
Venezuela's regime is an authoritative regime. Haiti has no government. It's a corrupt government.
Right.
Run by gangs.
Right?
Yeah,
and clearly there are a lot of factors there. Representative, you said a couple of things in that exchange on the floor that really struck me. One was that, you've been a good soldier for a long time. But then secondly, you said that to your colleagues that you don't know what it's like to live in my skin. What did you mean by that?
Well, look, what I mean by that is the colleagues that I've worked with. Look, I've been in the legislature 16 years. I think I've earned the respect of my colleagues for doing my homework, for working hard, for being respectful on the floor, for being able to work across the aisle. Those are the traits that I think I've brought to the table over my time in the legislature, and I've been effective. I've been able to provided the opportunity, earn the opportunity, earn the trust of this particular speaker, and I support it. And so, for me, it's personal because as much as folks can empathize with the plight of people of color in this state, we have a very difficult, tragic history in this state as it relates to its treatment of people of color. That is a fact. Nobody can deny that. However, for me, on a personal level, nobody's lived the life that I've lived, right? And those that look like me, people of color in this state that are proud Americans, that are proud Texans, we have that history. We have to acknowledge that history, but we also have to know that, unfortunately, some folks, they may empathize, but they haven't lived in our skin. They haven't lived our experiences. And that's where I'm getting it.
Any regrets about that exchange?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It
Have
was,
you have you heard from any of your Republican colleagues privately since then?
no, I've heard from them. There was a look. I've met with a lot of my Republican colleagues. We have had good conversations. We're trying
But
to find
what do they say after this, though? Did they say anything after this?
most of the exchanges that I've had have been positive. And so, to the extent that there's any backlash or perceived backlash, I haven't received it from my Republican colleagues.
I think, Representative, I think what really stood out to us is that we saw a human side of a lawmaker there, and we don't see that a lot on the House floor. We hear impassioned speeches from the back microphone, maybe from the front microphone, but we don't see what people are like on a human level, and that's what this was.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I think that's look. I didn't know somebody was filming, so let me just let me just acknowledge that I had no idea that a camera was on the encounter. It was a raw. It was an encounter that I don't regret because that's how I felt and that's how I feel. But I'm not the only one that feels that way. There are hundreds of thousands of people in this state that love this state, that are proud Americans, but sometimes feel that those that are in power try everything in their power to marginalize communities that look like me. I have a vote too. Uh, I'm one of 150 members, and I love the legislature. But I'm not gonna sit by and let folks continue to one try to circumvent the process, at the same time substantively attack our communities. I do not regret what was said on the floor, and it was wrong, yes. And there was some language that maybe I wouldn't, my grandmother, probably my abuelita probably wouldn't appreciate. Um, but I know my late abuelita and my late abuelo would be proud that I stood up for my values because that's what they taught me.
Well, let me ask you about House Bill 4 specifically, one of the three bills that relate to the border and immigration. House Bill 4 would give local police the authority to detain someone they suspect is here illegally and take them back to the border. What do you think the reality is going to be when this becomes law?
Look, I mean, all that does is sow mistrust between. Let's just. I'm born and raised in Houston, as I said. Houston is a great town, but it's an international city. And we're a welcoming community. This city is opens its arms to hardworking people from all walks of life, in all countries and all backgrounds. Right. The Houston Police Department has had a difficult history, but in recent times, they've done a good job of hiring people from the community. Look, our sheriff is African American, right? And they do a good job of recruiting those the police force that's reflective of the community, and that should be applauded. It also has been very proactive in working with our immigrant community, and because they become victims of crimes whether they're documented or not, right?
Sure, oh sure,
And so
but as far as I'm sorry, as far as the effects of HB4, do you think that families are going to get picked up on the streets essentially because they might not be able to prove, or they don't have ID on them that proves that they're a citizen?
yes, because that's what the language of the bill does. The plain meaning of the language authorizes state or local law enforcement the authority to determine if somebody's here without papers or not, right? So I know many law enforcement officers. Some of them are in my family. I know that I can't speak for all of them, but I can safely say that if they wanted to be Border Patrol agents, they would have gone to be Border Patrol agents, right? They wanted to be Harris County Sheriff deputies, or they wanted to be Houston police officers. If they wanted to be in the immigration business, that's what they would have done. But they've become local law enforcement. I don't think they want to have that type of authority to then determine if somebody's here undocumented or not, right? Because somebody could be seeking asylum, somebody could be a DACA recipient, somebody could be in the process of adjusting their status, right? But because they don't have proper documentation at the time of a particular stop, then you're just empowering, um, uh, you know, a regime that probably is going to make mistakes. That's just a sad reality sometimes.
What's your biggest worry on this bill here specifically?
Well, precisely that you're empowering local law enforcement to make a determination where they may or may not have the proper training, and you can engulf family members, right? Because this bill, unlawful entry, works with the other bill with human smuggling, because those two bills work in tandem, right? So if I'm a U.S. citizen, right, and maybe I have my grandmother here, or maybe I have a father that's here that might be trying to adjust status, and that law enforcement officer stops me, right? I potentially could be charged with human smuggling and face a 10-year mandatory minimum, because that's what the bill does, a 10-year mandatory minimum. And my grandparent, who may or may not be, or my father, who may or may not be undocumented because maybe they're adjusting their status, could be charged with another crime for unlawful entry, get charged with the crime, and then get sent back to the port of entry, because that's what the bill exactly stipulates, that the law enforcement agent can then pick that person up and take them back, right? This is a law enforcement officer. He has a gun, he has a uniform, or she, he has a vehicle, he has lights, or she has lights on that vehicle. So that is the sad reality.
What option do Democrats have from here? Is this a bill and a law that's going to end up in court?
I anticipate some legal action being taken. One particularly on preempting federal immigration law, particularly on the unlawful entry. I think it's a state jail felony.
How soon would that happen, do you think?
Well, honestly, it's hard to tell now, only because the legislative process is still working. It just passed the Senate, or just passed the House 3 or 4 o'clock this morning, and so we'll see once it gets over to the Senate and how fast it gets to the governor's desk, and then once we get those timelines, we'll figure out a plan of action after that.
But you think that this is something that would end up in court, though?
I anticipate some legal action on this. Absolutely.
Representative, thank you for the time. We appreciate that and the honesty as well, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.